Rising anger on Thailand streets and an unprecedented challenge to its monarchy. There have been protests against politicians and generals before, but with demonstrators now also criticising the king, is this time different? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Thailand's king is facing his biggest challenge since ascending to the throne 4 years ago. Pro-democracy protesters are demanding curbs on his powers, and they also want the Prime Minister, a former army general, to resign. The demonstrations are largely student-led and have spread across Thailand in recent months. Dozens were arrested or injured in rallies that took place in the last few days. So, what are the protesters' main concerns about the Thai monarchy? They accuse the king of moving beyond his role of a constitutional monarch, which has been the law since 1932. They oppose his move to take personal control of tens of billions of dollars in crown assets. The protesters also want to change broadly worded laws that threaten anyone who criticises the royal family with up to 15 years in jail. Activists also complain the king spends much of his time in Europe, mainly in Germany. We'll bring in our guests in just a moment, but first, Tony Cheng has this update from Bangkok.
This is the spot on Friday where the Thai government appeared to draw a line under their indulgent attitude towards student protests that have been gaining momentum since July. Riot police and water cannon pushed back the protesters in scenes that shocked many Thais, and they saw them on social media and on TV. The government has also employed new emergency legislation to seize those student leaders. And on Saturday, the police effectively closed off the whole of central Bangkok to try and stop any more protests taking place. The students have also been very resourceful. Using social media, they've created flash-up mobs, and their core demands have been the same. They want the government to step down, they want the monarchy to be reformed, and they want their leaders to be released and to stop the harassment of those taking part in these protests. Where does this go from here? Well, nobody's quite sure. The protesters seem to be able to operate at will, but surely the government will push for a harder crackdown. And it should be remembered that just down the road from here in 2010, the army used live fire against red shirt protesters. The generals who were in charge on that day are running the country today. And many people here are concerned that could happen again. For Inside Story, I'm Tony Cheng.
Let's bring in our guest. Joining us from Bangkok, Nutta Mahattana, a pro-democracy activist and leader of the We Vote movement. In Kyoto, Japan, Pavin Chachavalpongpun, associate professor at Kyoto University, and also in Bangkok, Jade, Donavanik, chairman of the Faculty of Law at the College of Asian Scholars. A warm welcome to you all. I'd like to begin in Bangkok with you, Nutta. These protests are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's not just the government that's in the firing line. This time, it's the monarchy as well, and particularly the king. What's the difference between these protests and protests, say, a decade ago, when it wasn't really about the monarchy? Why is it about the monarchy this time?
I think because the number of the coup accumulated and people start to see that the monarchy needs the reform in order for it to be really under the constitution and not being able to interfere with politics. That's the main reason, I think.
Well, let me bring in Pavin here as well. You're in Kyoto. Now, this is a very interesting period of time for Thailand because the king is under much more of a microscope than he ever has been before for what many people consider quite eccentric behaviour. Staying in Germany, taking over $40 billion worth of the country's assets, and generally not trying to destroy a constitutional monarchy. Is that right?
Well, I mean, that's quite right observation. I think this is about the monarchy not behaving constitutionally. Since the enthronement in 2016, you have seen the king attempting to consolidate his power once again out of the constitution. For example, you have the constitution amended in relation to the royal affairs so that he could exercise more power. And you yourself said that it is correct that the king also transfer all the assets under the Crown Property Bureau to be under his own possession, worth about 60 billion US dollars. The king is also allowed to have his private troop and also to be protected by the less majesty law. So I think the students sort of has come to terms with, the demand for the reform. Basically to put the monarchy back in the constitution. Why it is so difficult?
Nutta, what do you think of that? Why is the king trying to reinstill or instill a absolute monarchy?
I think it is too far to say that, because I don't have enough evidence. And he's on the throne for just a few years, but we see some sign that is worrying. For the first thing, after we have the new constitution, after it passed the referendum, there was the interference there to amend some clause that is about the king's authority, and that is a worrying sign.
Jade, Donavanik in Bangkok also, I mean, we are looking at a king who is not that popular amongst certainly students, certainly the younger end of the population. Do you think there is a popular mass swelling of support for the anti-monarchy movement?
Well, I will not touch upon the popularity of His Majesty the King, but I think the question that the students are posting upon the regime as well as the establishment and the government as a whole, I think that is something to be looked at, that whether or not the core of the proposal is actually demonstrating that there's a problem of popularity against the king, or is it the problem of the regime as a whole, that we are calling upon the reform of democracy in this country, that we think that the government is problematic, and that we think that overall the institution is the head of state. However, the control of the country, the administration of the country is within the establishment hands. And now the establishment has turned itself into the government, and that might be the actual problem. So if we can tackle this issue together, I think the question of popularity of the king might not be of a question.
But if it's this king is particularly controversial. He lives in Germany, Jade. He doesn't really spend that much time. He's trying to change the constitution, and you're effectively saying that actually the protesters should be protesting against the government, not the monarchy. But this is a monarch that is actually taking steps that are encouraging people to question his rule.
Yeah, I think if you look at the amendment to the constitution that has been raised, that His Majesty the King amended to serve himself. If you look at the draft constitution as a whole, when it was drafted under the reign of King Rama IX. There had been many issues during such time that were written in order to work the ways out in the reign of King Rama IX. We don't know what is the need and what is with His Majesty King Rama X, that His Majesty has to stay in Germany. But the way in which His Majesty is working under this current constitution also linked to the amendments to the constitution, so that His Majesty will be able to serve the country better. So I think if we look at it this way, we will find out that there is also some issues, some aspects of the constitution that, of course, yes, is amended, might have to be revised in the future, but it's not gearing towards the power or the royal prerogative of His Majesty the King, but gearing towards how His Majesty the King can work for the country more effectively.
Yes, but this is a king who has introduced the lèse majesté laws, which allow people to go to jail for criticism of the monarchy for up to 14 years. Nutta, 15 years rather. And Nutta, just tell me, I mean, when you listen to somebody like Jade, what are your thoughts? Do you think that you're not being respectful enough of the Thai monarchy, and actually what you're doing is incredibly disrespectful?
I don't think Dr. Jade talked about me when he said I'm not respectful, because obviously I think I have never done that. I think among the pro-democracy movement, there's a diversity among us. The way we may have the same aim and the same goal, that we want to reform the monarchy, because there are a few laws that is problematic as well. For example, the lèse majesté law, which is not in line with the global standard for the rule of law. But among the movement, we have some people who are quite radical in the way they communicate. We have some people who communicate rudely, or even defame the king, or communicate in the way that you should not actually do that to anybody, let alone being the king or not. And there are people who just communicate on the principle, and that should be okay with every ears, including Dr. Jade and maybe other royalists. So I think this is an important point. There is a diversity among the pro-democracy movement. And although we have the same goal in moving the country forward to be in the international standard of the democracy and constitutional monarchy, the way we communicate does affect people's feeling, and that may be the factor that caused some of the major conflicts here.
Pavin, in Kyoto, it's very interesting that what we're seeing to develop between our two guests here, who have different sides of the same protest coin, is that the monarchy is seen to be quite a powerful institution. But unlike in the UK, where you have this free-spirited, almost mocking of the monarchy in some points, even if you're critical of the monarchy, there still seems to be an acknowledgement that it is a powerful institution. Does that make this protest unique and a bit more difficult to try and get change?
Well, I guess, I mean, this conversation start to bore me, because I don't know why the other presenters or the other commentators just basically do not get to the point, just go around the bush. Come on, we all adult here, and we know where is the problem, right? It is okay to criticize the monarchy, and no matter how radical you are, I mean, you're talking about an institution that is so divine. For a lot of people who have been under this regime for so long, being dominated for so long, when their benefit being taken away, I think you have to understand that these people basically just full of anger, and the way that they responded, in their protest could come across as radical. I think it is okay with that, right? And this also to compare with the UK monarchy to the British monarchy. I have lived in the UK for many years, and I can see big differences here. So whereas you can mock, the queen, it is still okay, because I mean the queen has certain status, and that she still remain powerful even when she allow her people to criticize her. I think that is the key, not only to make the monarchy remain powerful, but also to remain relevant and also respectful for other people as well. Coming back to the Thai monarchy, this is totally different issue. We know the problem with the lèse majesté law. It has become political weapons. Anyone can use this law to undermine their opponents. So I think the more they use this law, lèse majesté, the more it could damage, the reputation of the monarchy. And that has been the issue, the problem with the Thai monarchy for so long.
Jade, our guest in Kyoto, is suggesting that this monarchy is using laws against its own people that may well backfire, particularly the lèse majesté law, which means any criticism of the monarchy, you could face 15 years in jail. Is the monarchy overstepping its powers?
Well, no, and I think I have three aspects to discuss here. I can agree with Kun Pavin in the first aspect that the some of the politicians and perhaps some of or part of the establishment in the long time of the Thai history throughout many coups that had happened had used the lèse-majesté laws to suppress its opponents. That I can agree with. And I think that's wrong in itself. And I don't think that has something to do with King Rama X, our current king, directly at all. Because in raising the imprisonment of the lèse-majesté law here in this country, that happened long ago. I think it was during the time that His Majesty, our current king, was just appointed by His Majesty King Rama IX as the crown prince. So that's the first thing that yes, I can agree with. The second thing is that when we look at insulting, when we're looking at defaming, I think we have to differentiate between those and mocking or taunting, and differentiate these with what we call commenting, criticizing. I think we can comment, we can criticize, but I think taunting someone, mocking someone, even when someone raised the issue that, yes, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II didn't mind, but I think that is also disrespectful to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. But if it's up to the level of
but Jade, there is a big difference between being critical and protesting the fact that the king spends most of his time in Germany. He's transferring $40 billion from the state to a personal fund. He is making moves, so say the protesters, to try and bring in an absolute monarchy. Those are fair criticisms, are they not?
Well, I think I'm not sure about being fair or not, but I can accept that is called comment or criticizing. Okay, but what I was saying is that if it's up to the level of insulting or defaming, it's wrong against everyone, not only His Majesty the King. Okay, the third issue is that I think we have to tackle the real problem of this country. And if we get through with the real problem of this country, and if you think that partly under constitutional monarchy or democracy with king as head of state, there is a problem in there, I think we can call for reform of the regime of democracy with king as head of state, or reform of the regime of constitutional monarchy, but not attacking directly to reform the monarchy or to discipline the conduct of His Majesty the King. I think we have to separate all these issues from each other.
Nutta in Bangkok, what our other guest in Bangkok seems to be saying is that, yes, you can protest, yes, you can be critical, however, you can't mock or insult the king, but the laws are so wide and can be interpreted in many different ways. Are you worried that free comment, fair criticism is going to be used against you and it'll be seen as an insult and therefore you might be arrested?
Okay, let me correct you a little bit. I did not say that you cannot mock the king, but I say that a certain way of communication may make the aim of reform becoming more difficult, because we have to admit that the context in Thailand, the monarchy is part of the culture for a long time, and sometimes it is done with propaganda, and we all know that, which means there are fractions in the society, and there are it's like two polars in the society. And in order to make the reform possible, you need the buy-in from all parties, or even you need a consensus in order for the reform to take place. And that's why I put a very high importance of how we communicate. And yes, I agree, we should be able to criticize, we should be able to mock at a certain level by certain people. You cannot control the whole population, but in order for the reform to take place, we have to, at the same time we talk, we also have to listen and see what the other side think, and that was my point. So for your question about whether or not we can criticize freely, we cannot, because at the moment, even when they don't use the lèse majesté law, and we believe by the order of the king, other law is being used. For example, the Computer Crime Act, the sedition law, which are all with very harsh punishment, and that is even more damaging to our rule of law in the country, because the authority will try to distort the detail in the case in order to make a person guilty, and that is not right. I would rather they use the lèse majesté law than trying to use other law which is not relevant to the act of the person. And this is where the problem is. Because we cannot yet reform the monarchy, and because we cannot, the parliament will not even talk about amending the lèse majesté law. And when you try to avoid using the
sorry,
law,
Nutta, we are running out of time, and I do want to come
Yes.
to our other guests as well, and we will come back to you hopefully. Pavin, let's talk about the international community just very quickly. In Germany, the Bundestag, members of the Bundestag, the parliament there, have been very quietly warning about the king spending all his time in Germany. They're very uncomfortable with him consolidating power from Germany. Who's backing the king here? Who are his allies?
Well, I guess, whatever happened in the German parliament was not really surprising to anyone else, because, as you said, the king stay most of the time in Germany. And I think the key issue here is basically the king might have been exercising his power, under the German sovereignty. So there are two issues here, if you want to go into it. One is for the king to bleach German sovereignty. The other one is whether whatever the king has been doing in terms of exercising his power on German soil, whether it could become effective under the Thai sovereignty. So, this could become sort of legal complication. There's a lot of proof, if you want to do so. For example, the king has ratified, has signed a number of official documents. For example, the Royal Gazette, you can check when these documents were dated. I'm sure that a lot of them were dated during which time the king stayed in Germany. So this is really, this is how the German parliament would like to highlight that even while he is staying in Germany, again, he's still exercising his power. So, if it is not illegal at this point, it is definitely unusual and inappropriate. So I think I was told that the German parliament would continue to look into this case, even including the issue of the abduction and killing of dissidents overseas, whether there would be a kind of involvement.
Pavin, let me just bring in Jade here. Jade, how do you justify the fact that your king is living in Germany and ruling almost from Germany?
As I said, that when the constitution was amended, it was amended for His Majesty, our current king, to be able to serve the country more effectively. I don't get into
how
why
does he
His
serve the
Majesty
country more
is spending most
effectively
of his
in
time
Germany? How does he do that?
I see. As I said, that I don't get into the issue why His Majesty has to spend His Majesty's time in Germany. But I look at how His Majesty is able to work effectively for the country.
Nutta, do you think, Nutta, in Bangkok, do you think he's working effectively for the country from Germany?
I don't know enough detail to comment on that, because basically he just have to sign some papers, and but there was some laws that was delayed. I remember, but I cannot remember the detail here. I think that the information is too little to comment on that.
Pavin, you had some things. I heard you being very animated there. Tell us what you were thinking.
Well, yeah, how could you talk about effectiveness when the head of the state working elsewhere? I just want to give you a small example that we have a culture of certificate presentation. The king has delayed this ceremony for 3 or 4 years just because he stayed outside the country for so long. This is something very trivial. But if you really want to look into something more serious, how could you say that this is for the king's own convenience? When the king operates with taxpayer money, it has to be the people convenience, not the king convenience. Oh my God, seriously.
I'd like to thank all our guests, Nutta Mahattana, Pavin Chachavalpongpun and Jade Donavanik. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now.